Okay, how are you doing? We've worked together for, I don't know, really consistently for the last 4 months.
Probably. I don't even remember how long it's been.
It doesn't matter. But anyway, so
No.
you were binge eating, but prior to that, you had done a round of perfectionism with food, health righteousness, right?
Right.
But prior to that, you were dieting, binging for a long time, since your childhood.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and like with really never any break from the binging except when I was on protocol.
Yeah, so you were abusing
Because
the protocol.
I was abusing the protocol because I could do the protocol perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm ready for P4. And I realized on Sunday, my mom and my daughter-in-law came over and we were making Christmas candy, which I hadn't made Christmas candy for years because I didn't eat chocolate and I didn't eat carbs because of my health righteousness. So I decided that wasn't really fair to my family or to myself, and so we got together, made candy. It was a lot of fun. Really didn't have any desire to eat the candy while we were making it. I just enjoyed doing it and was thinking about how much my boys were going to enjoy it. And it hit me that I hadn't had any thoughts of binging or had binged for, I couldn't even remember the last time that I had thoughts of binging. Like it was completely gone. And that hit me like a ton of bricks.
In a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. In a very good way.
I'm going to apologize really quick. You're going to see this video, and this is my Christmas wrapping room now. So in the background, there is shit everywhere. And I'm like trying to adjust my seat, and I've got bags of stuff over here. It's just annoying. So, the lighting is terrible right now. Can't decide how to do this. I think that's better. Okay, so huge, right? Because there's no desire to do it. There's no like feelings of loss that you're not doing it. Like, oh, I don't get to binge. I know I felt lost for a while. So there's nothing there. And that means you also have, like I just said this, but you have no desire. There's no reason. You don't want to. There's no desire to do it. And the other thing is, even with your Christmas cookies and your Christmas candies, it's like, do you want to feel sick? Because that's ultimately the reality that occurs. You feel sick and inflamed.
Right.
So because we've gotten rid of all dieting, it doesn't make sense to do that either. Like there's no pendulum swing going on. There's no all or nothing going on. It's kind of like it just sits in the center, right? In terms of hunger, I eat. Stop, fullness, I stop. Hunger, I eat. And it's a natural pendulum swing rather than this forceful swing to get some food, full well knowing that eventually, whatever the consequences are, they will be removed. So you don't have to think about those consequences of inflammation and pain and fat gain and having to get new clothes. You don't even consider those things. In fact, when people are on that binge swing, the illusion of losing weight later, they don't even recognize or don't acknowledge that they're gaining, even though they need to go up another size. Because in their mind, they're holding on to the idea that they will lose it. So the gaining that they have doesn't exist. So that dieting part of the process is so, don't you agree? It's very powerful. It's very controlling, but it's not very loud. It's a silent poison. Whereas the obvious issues are with this excessive amount of food, and it's very loud poison, very shaming inside. But the dieting, it's like that sheep, it's the wolf in sheep's clothing. It's very quiet. You don't see that it is a huge part of the mechanism, if not bigger than the actual binging, right? Do you see that more clearly now, that that entire dieting concept, that I can help you lose weight, we can make you healthier, we can help you feel good, we can control your impulses, that ultimately is a huge fuel to the issues you have with food. It's not just I have issues with food, right? It's I have issues dieting, which creates these issues with food. And ultimately then you have to look at, why am I dieting? Well, it's because I'm morbidly obese now. It's because I have these physical issues now. And if you don't, it's because I'm afraid to, I want to keep my superiority in my thinness. That's the anorexic side.
Yep.
Right? That was the side you went to after you lost so much weight with the HCG protocol. That's the danger of the protocol if you don't have proper assistance.
Right. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it pulls you into, I'm afraid to lose this pedestal, the idea that I'm so successful now, that I'm healthier now, that I feel good about myself in public.
And yeah.
People praise me now.
Right.
Which can also be a trigger.
Oh my god.
Because of the pressure.
That was a huge trigger for me. The pressure.
Just someone noticing makes you feel like I have to be even more perfect, because they will notice when I gain. And ultimately that just drives that silent poison with deprivation with food. Which, what happens in the end? You end up binging. And then feeling terrible. And then thinking the next day that you're going to start eliminating so that you don't gain weight because all these people noticed. I mean, it becomes defining in your brain. Anyway, so now you're in reality with major past trigger food because it was shame food.
Yeah, and even like that Sunday night, I made my husband had a board meeting the next day, and so I made this cake that had cream cheese frosting on it, and I got done frosting the cake, and I stuck the spoon in my mouth, and I was like, oh crap, I wasn't supposed to do that. But it wasn't like I didn't go into, oh hell, I screwed it up now, I may as well just eat the whole bowl of frosting, whatever.
Yeah, because there's no difference between the whole bowl, right? And that's the emotional. That is a obvious consequence from that not obvious diet concept.
Yep.
Right? You see that. It's like, I screwed up. Well, you wouldn't have screwed up if you weren't such a zealot with your health righteous food mongering, right? Your fear mongered food religiosity. You wouldn't be so cognitive distorted about that. It wouldn't have created this, I might as well eat the whole bowl because the whole body's poisoned now. I might as well poison it all away. And there's a big difference between a bite, a cookie, and the whole tray. But when you have this cognitive distortion around food righteous zealotry, they're all bad. It's like this sin is just as bad as that sin. So you might as well do it all in between.
Yeah.
Before you do penance. Because the penance, once again, that's again the diet.
Yep.
That's the quiet, pervasive poison. That is the actual cause of the food issues.
And there was absolutely none of that.
Yeah. Well, and that has to do with the fact that we've really, you've let go of that thin supremacy. You've really accepted that your body's going to be what it's going to be. You're going to eat hunger. You're going to eat what you want. You're going to have those candies. You want to know why? Because you don't want to have to deprive your life of them anymore. Doesn't mean, and you can have them all year long. And next Christmas, and the next Christmas, and the next Christmas, and you didn't ruin anything. And what happens now when you eat those candies?
There's no guilt, no shame, just
no impulse to binge.
The moment.
There's no impulse to binge because of that. Because there's no shame, no guilt. Because you don't believe that you're sinning. Because you don't believe you're destroying your body. Because you're not distorted anymore. The only way to undistort that emotional response to food is to undistort your fears about it and beliefs about it.
And the other thing I've noticed is that I used to spend most of my day wondering what people thought of me and how I looked and that I'd gained weight, and that is completely gone. I don't, once in a while, I'll catch a glimpse of myself, but it's not the, oh my God, look at you. You're such a failure. I just don't even think about it. It is like not even in my head anymore.
Do you think it's because you kind of come out of the closet with it and you're like, this is my body? You've exposed it. You've gone through that exposing process.
Yeah.
We went through that this summer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Remember when you had those friends that hadn't seen you since you were super thin and fit and sharing your gluten-free, dairy-free, nut-free, sugar-free lifestyle?
Yeah.
And then it basically is like visible, like obvious failure, and you came out and you didn't defend it. You didn't talk about, you know what I mean? That was a big step in the fact that you don't really have any issues now.
That was a huge step. Yeah, and that was the most difficult step, I think.
That was for me too. It's coming out to yourself and coming out with the embarrassment. And I don't know, how did we really went through that, I think, multiple times. Like, what are you going to say when your dad thinks that you're ugly, says something?
Yeah.
And you can't just come out of the closet to yourself and expect that everybody else is going to be understanding, especially people that have no clue and are part of why you believed in thin supremacy to the degree you did, right? Like your dad, that you had to be okay with him going, you really should take care of your health. I'm concerned about your health. Maybe you should go back on that diet again. Right? Which is so like, if he's concerned about the health that the diet industry thinks that you should have. And he believes it and supports that. Not necessarily that it was incredibly unhealthy for you to do that.
Right.
Psychologically, behaviorally, and then ultimately physically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the willingness to forgive, right? To not have to defend yourself, to understand. They just don't have a clue. Like, they truly are brainwashed by the health industry to think that thinness is healthiness and dieting is healthy, which there's so much evidence it's not, psychologically and behaviorally, which ultimately physically is unhealthy. Make sense? That coming out of the closet is really important. And it takes a lot of humility to be able to say, I failed. I'm a failure at what I presented. And I presented it as if I was the most amazing at it. Right? It's not just I failed at this system. I failed at something that I supported and I preached about at my pedestal of health righteousness. And I used myself as the statue to be worshipped, do that and then come out as like, I was wrong. Obviously what I was preaching and what I studied and what I memorized and what I obsessed over, what I got certified in and what I did clearly doesn't work because it's not manageable. And it's not necessarily me that doesn't work. It's that system that doesn't work. And that's the hard part, I think, for a lot of people in the process of recovery is separating themselves from the system. That was like me in religion. Like, it's not me that's terrible. I'm a good person in my heart. It's these crazy, over-the-top, rigid rules that have no grace, to where drinking alcohol is no different than having sex while drinking alcohol. Those two are the same because alcohol is a gateway drug to the devil worship, So if it's the gateway to the sin, then it is the sin. Like, it's totally distorted, right?
Yep.
Twisted, all nothing. Drinking alcohol is the same as, whatever sin it creates. Yeah, it's just, I had to unravel that in my head and realize that it's not me that sucks. It's that thought that sucks. It's not you that sucked. It was the restriction that sucked because your brain is wired to feast when there's restriction, right? That's evolution working perfectly.
Right.
So it's not,
Yeah.
you have to open your mind and look at it from a distance to say, well, that's unrealistic based on just survival mechanisms. And it's triggering a survival mechanism. And I'm being shamed and being told I have no self-control, when in reality, everybody who's on this earth today is here because of human evolution and the fact that psychologically our brain is wired to seek food when there's famine. It's amazing, really, and you're shamed for it. And you ultimately shame yourself. So even if others are still shaming you, the fact that you're willing to forgive yourself makes it a lot easier for you to realize I understand where they're coming from. They have no clue. They're not seeing it from a distance. They're so close and sucked into it that they're stigmatizing people as lazy, no self-control, and all of those terrible things that aren't true for the majority of people that are struggling with eating disorders, disordered eating, and just emotional eating.
Yeah, and when we first talked about that, like, all those things made sense when you said them, but I really couldn't wrap my head around how that was connected to what I was doing. And now on the backside of it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So, well, what I just said is actually, it's like intellectual. The problem is you still had this emotional distortion. So it was hard you could hear it intellectually, connect the dots and go, yeah, that's about right. But how do you manage this emotionally? I still emotionally want to be thin. I'm still emotionally embarrassed to be fat. I still believe that sugar is the next deadliest poison to cocaine,
Yep.
I'm still overeating it. So it's really takes if I were to say what's the antidote to blend that like logic we understand that is useless until the you emotionally are open to it, it's humility. It's that willingness to admit failure. That clearly what I learned from the diet industry isn't working for the 95+% of everybody doing it.
Yeah, that being able to admit the humility of it and embrace the humility, that was really difficult for me for a while.
Yeah, but don't you agree, kind of in observation, as we're talking through this through observation, that humility was the key to getting your emotional development, to emotionally develop, really. And to get to where you're willing to go out in public with this body and you have no sense of shame, or even you don't care what people think. And even if someone did look at you and go, oh my God, you really should try this new keto diet we're going to do. You just are like, no, thank you. You should do it. I hope it works for you. There's a big separation between someone else's opinion and your reality. It no longer invades your reality. That's another thing. Someone else's opinion before would have been absolutely defining and affecting. It would have affected your behavior. Someone else's thoughts and opinions about your thinness or fatness or anywhere in between. It became a social vulnerability. Whereas now it's no, you're very solid in your foundation of accepting this body, letting it do what it's going to do, forgiving the damages that were done for the decades that you did diet trying to fix it, and really forgiving people's ignorance about what this really is about, right? Because the majority of people out there are totally unaware.
Yeah,
it's not like they're it's not like they're aware and judging you. They're completely unconscious.
I wanted to explain myself all the time and tell them what, and so that was another step, getting, just accepting this was the right thing for me, and letting other people believe what they need to believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just recognizing that, a lot of this process took quite a bit of suffering for you to be open-minded to it. I mean, it took a lot of suffering and going back and forth, right? Going back into it, going even more stricter into the food and healthness. Because the first time we worked together, it was just for the protocol, and we made some progress, but it clearly didn't hit the core.
Right.
You and I didn't talk for a year, and then you came back way worse, right? And it was because you went back into, I'm going to do this for my health. I can't quit.
Yeah, I was on my knees when I came back.
Yeah, you were, and you still wanted that thinness, and I had to manipulate our approach to where you had to ease your way into recovery. It wasn't just smack recovery. Some people it is, but
Have I talked to you since I went to the rheumatologist?
no. I did know that you were super inflamed after the trauma. You had a very traumatic fall. This fall season was really hard. Very post-traumatic stress, really. I don't need to explain it to the listener, but unless you want to, but you had significant life-altering events happen this fall.
Yeah, and
it flared your rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
And you were on the protocol.
Right.
Which is, some people, food zealots out there would be like, what? Really? It's so like alkaline and it's so like non-inflammatory, but the HCG is incredibly inflammatory, right? Anyways.
Yeah. So, I went and my weight was actually up. And he said, well, your weight's up 4 pounds. And I said, oh, well, actually it's down from previously, but that's all right. And he said, then he went through and I had about a 45% reduction in the number of inflamed joints, which was good. But when he was talking about my weight and trying to get me off the prednisone, and I said, well, I just did some very intense therapy for an eating disorder, and I'm really in a good place right now, and I'm okay with my weight. And he just smiled and he said, okay, then, that's good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Which is usually the case with these doctors. If they hear you have an eating disorder, a lot of that instruction to diet just goes, because they know it's not going to help you. It makes it worse.
Yeah, and he said, congratulations on what you've accomplished. And I said, well, thank you. And now let's just talk about my arthritis.
That's awesome. That right there would have been hugely triggering. Huge before.
Oh, yeah.
You would have felt embarrassed. You would have been ashamed. It would have been, I got to fix this. I have to do something. You would have left there and binged your brains out. You would have stopped at the grocery store, at a fast food restaurant, gotten all the cookies, all the candy, and you would have just binged your brains out.
Yeah.
Which would have made the rheumatoid arthritis, like, bad.
Right. Yeah.
So overall, your health is better.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Like, even though on his records you just gained 4 pounds.
Right. And
what does that tell you about the central nervous system? The central nervous system is your brain and the spinal cord and how it regulates your endocrine system. So it's like you have the same amount of fat. He says you have 4 pounds more, whatever, and yet your inflammatory response is significantly less. Keeping in mind, right, you're eating when you're hungry, you're eating adequately, you're not under eating, and you're giving yourself the variety of food, right?
Yep.
And you're in the real world with food right now.
Yeah, I am. And coming out of off of P3 and moving into P4, you know, after I made I made fruitcake too, and I've been just really hungry for fruitcake. And so, I know you always ask, what's the one thing you've been hungry for? And it will be the fruitcake.
You know, that is like good for you. You go get that fruitcake, girlfriend.
Yeah.
And are you going to? Will you binge on it? You know.
That's what I was going to say. I know I can eat it and won't think I have to eat the whole thing because it might go away.
That's a huge deal. It takes the pressure away, takes the angst away. You don't have to manage, I can only have a few bites. Just that thought right there. Again, that pervasive silent poison. The idea I can only have right away creates this issue with food. Most people don't even recognize it. You know, the diet limitation in your mind then limits the food before you even eat it. not realizing
Exactly.
that ultimately ends up with overeating. But the fact that you can have, you're to enjoy how much the body, you're to enjoy it, be present with it. You're not to have thoughts about it. You're to just let it be in your mouth and taste it and the crunchy nuts and whatever is in it. And then as soon as you feel satisfied, you put it away. You want to know why? Because you can have more later. The next time you're hungry, there's no limit. There's no, I can only have 2. I can only have 1 bite. I can only have this once a day. There's none of that. It's all like, I can have it whenever. So it becomes more of a naturally regulated process. Right?
Yeah.
And you can always have more later. You can get fruitcake all year round. That's how abundant this is here.
Yeah, every time I got it out to slice a piece off for my husband, I would just look at it and smile and think, I'm going to just sit and enjoy a piece when it's my turn.
Yeah, and how would you have felt a year ago?
I would have tried to sneak slices off of it and then decide if my husband could tell if there was less fruitcake, and then maybe just eat the whole thing and then tell him that I dropped it on the floor because I couldn't admit that I ate the whole thing.
And how would you have felt internally?
Oh, just like the turmoil that goes on in your brain and your body and your emotions
and you feel like a farce, right? Because you're preaching this healthiness, but yet you cannot do it.
Right.
It's not sustainable. Yeah. And you're having, it's like and then you just feel like a piece of crap.
Right. Yeah, and then I would have thought, well, I already ate some of the fruitcake, so I may as well just finish off the peanut butter balls, even though I wouldn't really want them, because I've already screwed it up.
Yeah, and in your mind, you're also thinking, and when the Christmas season is over, after the New Year, I'm going to go back. So let's just get rid of it.
Yep.
So you're not even eating it, again, for that narcotic pleasure. You're eating it out of, like, shame, trying to get rid of it, thinking that it's already ruined.
Yeah.
Think of just how not narcotic that is, even though you're being told from everywhere, it's a narcotic, you're addicted to sugar. No.
Yeah.
Looks that way, but underneath it all, it really isn't. It's that pervasive dieting. It's that shame about the food. It's kind of the anorexic lifestyle that's been promoted so intensely in our culture.
Yeah.
Because of the shaming of body fat, So that's amazing. That's amazing. You know how I'm not surprised about your rheumatoid arthritis, though. I mean, that central nervous system is so powerful to inflame. Stress will do that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like my diabetes. My diabetes, when I was moving,
Right.
It's like, I don't meet the associative criteria. So how did I end up with such terrible, it's like, well, yeah, that's what inflammation does. I wasn't binging, I was, if anything, I probably wasn't eating enough because I was under stress and not hungry. But anyway, so it's just so much of the diet industry is focused on making fat the blame, making your body weight the cause. And it's an association. There is no real causation, and there's tons and tons of science to show otherwise. But it makes millions, if not billions of dollars for that industry to shame and blame body fat than to promote their diet, promote their cleanse, promote their, detox, to promote their supplements. They make a lot of money to promote their surgeries. I mean, it's huge money to blame body fat and shame body fat, Anyways.
You saying that reminded me, this past 2 weeks I've had, again, some major life things going on. I got a second bout of shingles because of the amount of stress I'm under. But I realized through all of that I'm able just to sit in the feelings and think about what I'm feeling and how I'm going to react to it. And there was no need or want to binge over what I was going through. And in the past, I would have just wallowed in the food.
Okay, so we had this comes to the work we've done the last 2 months.
Yeah.
We talked very much about that position of being the victim. of having these grandiose expectations of reality, and then in reality, as it unfolds, you get something different. In fact, something more challenging. So having an expectation here, but in reality it being challenging, the difference between those two creating all of this discontent, victimization, poor me mentality, ultimately feeding into that desire, well, that I deserve this food. I feel so bad for myself, and wallowing in the issues with food. So some of your continued emotional eating may not have been binging, which is huge, but it's still you knew that was still dysfunctional. That's a huge part of the work that we just recently did.
Yeah.
Giving up the victim position. Poor me, my life sucks, which you've had for a long time.
Yeah. And now I can say, like, when I'm really feeling sorry for myself, I can say, okay, how and why are you making yourself a victim? And being able to think through that and not go back to the food has been huge as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being able to separate what's going on in the moment rather than just being being swept down a river of poor me, pity river, to have to sit and go, okay, of course I feel this way. Why do I feel this way? What is going on here? Why am I thinking like that? What was I expecting? Yep. This is reality. What can I do about it? That's a big one. What can I do about it? The other thing that we've talked about is gambling with the worst case scenario in a circumstance versus the best case scenario. Going into the worst case scenario, not that it's going to happen, but that can you handle that? Go into it before you make these decisions. What's the worst case scenario? If that's what happens, can I handle that? Is there a solution to it? And then from there, you're more like open to what reality, how it unfolds, versus coming to a decision thinking the best case scenario, this could be huge, getting high off of the fantasy of what you think it might be, and then a reality unfolds and it feels like loss.
Yeah.
To see how we just flip-flopped it. Don't go into fantasy. Don't expect the best case scenario. Go into the worst case scenario. Go into the risks of everything. Understand it like gambling. Like, I could lose this. If you can handle that, then all of a sudden what happens in reality, you don't have any position around. You're just, okay, here we are. You just accept it. So it doesn't feel like loss, drama. And all of a sudden your depression went away.
Yep.
Yeah, that is something I learned coming out of recovery. Like, I'll never gamble with the best case scenario again. I would rather be in reality, go into the loss of reality, that nothing is a guarantee, even life. And and with that, I'm more present. I'm more loving in reality. I'm more accepting of my humanness, my children's humanness, my husband's separate human from me. There's so much, it's just easier to just love people because you're not expecting them to perform for your fantasy.
Right.
Really letting go of that narcissism. Right?
Yep. Yeah. I've come a long way.
Yeah, that's just the emotional maturity that has to happen too, right? Because once you recover, you're left with this incredibly immature emotional space, because the diet industry and the food concept has always kind of it's enabled you to not ever develop, because you could always, fantasize like you're a teenager, feel sorry for yourself because it didn't work out, go to some form of narcotic with food, fix it with a diet, and it just kind of is this terribly enabling codependent relationship. And what gets enabled is your emotional immaturity. You don't ever really develop. And so this process has been also developing like the ability in a real life situation that is absolutely terrible for you and your work and what's been going on, and being able to go into that with grace for yourself, for the environment, for your employees, for the layers and layers and layers of grace to just accept the will of what's unfolding in front of you, which really you couldn't do anything about, right? Just changing your whole state of being. You're the same person, but the way you're being should feel very different.
Right.
Easier. Feel easier.
Yeah. Much easier.
So how are you feeling going into the Christmas holiday?
Fine. Like, other than a little panic over just not being ready for it, and I'm fine. Yeah, it's like, whatever.
I'm thinking we should schedule afterwards. See how you've done with all the. It's just kind of like that Thanksgiving experiment. It's like you're gonna have everything, all that food.
Right.
Does it have to be eaten in one day?
Yep.
No. Does it have to be eaten this season? No. There's always next season. You can get orange jelly sticks pretty much all year round. Those cordial cherries all year round.
Exactly.
You can make your, peppermint brittle all your own. Put it in the and every season it comes back.
Exactly. Yeah, I have it's just like, I'm more looking forward to spending time with my family.
Cool. And having fruitcake.
The bonus.
Having your fruitcake.
Yep.
Sweet. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop recording. Is there anything you would want to say to the listener who's like, I want what she's got? How did she get there? I want it so bad. What would you say to them?
That I know it's an investment with the money, but it's completely worth it, and that you just have to keep trudging your way through it, and just open your mind and your heart and have some grace for yourself. And I didn't think I would get here either, and here I am. So,
what were the most important parts of the process for you that made the difference?
The humility, and then also looking.
Which is that willingness to say I failed, the willingness to come out of the closet, the willingness to admit failure, willingness to be embarrassed, to let people see that this is not what I preached. It doesn't work. That's hard.
Yep. Yeah, that was a big one. And then the other was giving us the victim status.
Yeah.
That was a hard one.
Yeah, but it's so much hard to have the victim status. Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's a hard way to live.
Yeah. What really did it was when you told me, pretend that I'm writing a chapter about you in my book, and what will it say? And that really made me sit and look at myself and think about, what would that say? Who am I? Why am I here? Yeah, that made a big difference. But just, even though you have to walk through some pain to get to this point, it is completely worth it, because there's so much more pain and suffering in the where I was before. Mm-hmm. And going through a little bit to get to the other side is completely worth it.
I totally agree. It is worth it. It's hard to explain too, because it's not something that we presented to you, and then we had step-by-step process and control this awareness, so you can get this awareness. Like, you weren't aware of this existence, and you had to let it happen versus make it happen.
Right.
And then it's like, you couldn't have made this happen. To make it happen requires that you already have it and you understand how it works.
Right.
Like, you have an actual idea of what this is like, and then we make it happen. And it doesn't work that way. It works by... It's like letting shit go. It's like getting rid of...
That's what I was just going to say. You have to let go.
Yeah, and it's not... And that means that you have to be aware of whatever is on the other side, you got to just be okay with it, because it's not necessarily going to be what you're holding on to. Let it go.
Yeah.
It's like going into a whole new map. That's how I visualize it. It's like I've been on this map, and I've walked this path so much that I'm actually in a rut, and I don't know how to get out.
Yep.
And it's like I have to be willing to go into a brand new map where I don't know shit. I just know that I'm a good person, that I have a good heart, and I'll use that as my navigation versus my mind, my control. Like going into the power of the heart is pretty big. So much easier.
It is.
So much more genuine. Easier, genuine, more connected to people, less judgmental, more loving and compassionate, more easy around the luxuries we have, more gratitude for the luxuries we have. I mean, a totally different state of being. It's like your brain chemistry's changed.
Yep.
So, all right, I'm going to stop recording. Thanks for sharing this.
Yep.